My friends, what happened last night in the halls of power in Washington is not just about the economy. It's the final American verdict on what the Brazilian government is willing to do to its own people to protect two or three powerful figures. The United States has imposed on Brazil the most brutal of global punishments, the highest tariff for complicity in slave and forced labor. The American government divided the punished nations into 4 risk categories, and Brazil was thrown all the way to rock bottom in the worst possible category. A devastating surcharge of 12.5, which added to the existing 25, reaches a staggering 37.5 tariffs slapped right in the face of our economy. And for you to understand the extent of the diplomatic humiliation, look at the rest of the board. The American government spared its partners and shielded the aligned economies. Nations like Argentina, Canada, and the European Union bloc received a protective cap. Their penalty tops out at 10. Leading countries like Japan and Switzerland hit the maximum limit of 12.5%. But what about Brazil, you ask me? We were isolated in the dregs of global trade. Our tariff doesn't have a protective cap. Our country was hit with a cascading penalty, adding a heavy 12.5 on top of what already existed. And is the final verdict lethal? For Washington, the civilized world has limits. But Brazil has become the epicenter of risk. The 37.5 tariff means that Brazil is now seen by the world's major powers as a productive pariah. It's not just the price of things that goes up, it's the world aggressively closing its doors. Because the government decided that the profits and schemes of JBS and China are worth much more than the reputation and dignity of our country. And they won't admit it. But this tariff didn't come out of nowhere. The White House only applied the commercial guillotine because Lula's own government ministers acted behind the scenes to remove fines and wipe the slave labor record clean. Exactly from those who finance and support the maintenance of this power project. But why were the United States so aggressive exclusively with Brazil while dozens of other nations had much lower rates or even exemptions? The answer is in a video that the Union doesn't want you to see. Pay attention to this image that went viral on the internet. Inside the factory of the Chinese company BYD in Bahia, the scene is stark and revolting. A Chinese supervisor holding a stick in his hand, openly intimidating Brazilian workers at the workplace. Look how bad this is. It's a cell phone recording that exposes the raw humiliation inflicted on our worker. In other scenes and at other times, we saw a Chinese supervisor whipping a Brazilian worker in Minas Gerais. And at other times, they even came to blows. But the question that remains is, what did the Brazilian Ministry of Labor do in the face of these intimidations and other violations, which even accuse these same companies of conditions analogous to slavery or forced labor? In the case of the accusations against JBS and BYD, instead of enforcing the law, it removed the fine from the Asian manufacturer and shielded the company. The same shameful amnesty was handed on a silver platter to JBS, owned by businessman José Joesley Batista, a personal friend of President Lula and a well-known figure in corruption scandals and bribery confessions in the Lava Jato operation. We are facing the purest and most cynical architecture of impunity. The law in our country has a side, a color, and an ideology. And it's not the ideology preached by the government that claims to defend workers, the poor, black people, and so on and so on. No, the ones who benefit are the billionaires Joesley Batista, owner of JBS. Yes, they don't need to be defended by the government and not the workers, the Chinese Communist Party. They come here, pour in billions and billions, and buy whatever they want. If you think this is just bureaucratic inefficiency, wait until you see what would happen if the owner of that factory where the worker was threatened with a stick was Luciano Hang from Havan Stores. If it were a right-wing business owner's company labeled as exploiting forced labor, the system would show no mercy. The case would immediately be treated as a threat to national security. The press would be on standby, 24 hours a day. Jornal Nacional would talk about it non-stop until everything was destroyed. The Federal Supreme Court, through Minister Alexandre de Moraes, would open secret investigations in the middle of the night. The federal government would destroy the businessman with astronomical fines, account freezes, and passport confiscation. Look at what Obama is doing to rural producers up in northern Brazil. The leftist unions would shut down all the stores in the country with tire burnings and shouting. The businessmen would be locked up in a maximum security cell. But since the offenders are the king's friends, the silence is deafening. And look at the paradox. They're white, rich, millionaire offenders. It's the Chinese party threatening black workers. Where's Lula? Where's the left? Where are the defenders of human rights? Guys, when it comes to their group, none of these identity issues about race, color, or whatever matter. Josley confesses to crimes and is forgiven. The Communist Party of China finances globalist expansion and gets a free pass to subjugate black Brazilians. This is the real selective protection that the system feeds on. The geopolitics of slave labor reveals a Beijing-led axis operating freely in our hemisphere. China does not respect human rights. You know this very well. The Chinese model is not one of partnership. It's a purely extractivist model. They arrive in vulnerable countries in Africa or Asia, beat African employees, assault local workers, set up the infrastructure that interests them, and extract all the mineral or agricultural resources. And they leave, leaving the host country mired in unpayable debts. And now they're applying the same shock tactics in Brazil, in the case of BYD in Brazil. It won't just be a factory generating income for the locals, quite the opposite. It will be a front assembly plant where the vast majority of workers coming in are Chinese citizens imported by the regime. This solves two vital problems for Xi Jinping. It eases the lack of jobs in China since the Western world is cutting back on purchases from their market, and it establishes a forward control base in the heart of Brazil, right in the backyard of the United States. My friends, look at the level of the silent threat. Imagine the amount of dual-use technology that China will install under the guise of these electric vehicle manufacturers. Ultra-high-definition cameras, data monitoring sensors, telemetry intercept systems, and espionage software integrated directly into the national infrastructure. Dual-use, civilian and military. The United States imposed this tariff of 37.5. because they are on a true geopolitical crusade to try to rid the Americas of Chinese communism and the globalist influence that corrodes the continent from the inside out. Brazil today is the ultimate trophy, the last and most valuable stronghold of the globalist left in Latin America. And this trade guillotine was not triggered by just any bureaucrat. The order to attack came directly from the Oval Office. It was President Donald Trump himself who signed the relentless directive to hunt down and suffocate modern slavery right at its source. He called on his trade representative, Jameson Greer, to trigger the dreaded Section 301. This is not just a simple customs duty or tariff, understand that. It is a weapon of economic mass destruction designed to suffocate any nation that dares to produce or buy products tainted with blood and the sweat of forced labor. Trump's message to Greer is brutal. If Brazil wants to finance the totalitarian axis, then it should pay the price of isolation. And to sustain this continental apparatus, the left formed a dark symbiosis with totalitarian regimes. The U.S. State Department, in recent investigations that came to light through statements from figures such as Secretary of State Marco Rubio, revealed documents that dissect the Dark Alliance. Official reports from the American government show how Havana is still the epicenter of this network, stating that Cuba serves as the connective tissue of a broad anti-American coalition. The document attests that the island acts as a strategic convergence zone where the interests of Moscow and Beijing join those of radical movements operating within our own borders. The presence of Russian and Chinese intelligence officers on Cuban soil has tripled in the last 3 years. And it is exactly this totalitarian bloc that provides diplomatic and financial support for the Latin American left, including the current government of Brazil, to advance its agenda, without caring about the economic collapse it inflicts on its own people. The Brazilian president went all in because his umbilical cord is not connected to the needs of our population, but rather to this global power pact. Organized crime, factions, radical leftist groups, radical Islamic groups, all of this to take over the continent. The left doesn't care if, The meatpacking plants in the south of the country have already started mass layoffs. Why did Europe and China stop buying our meat? And now the American market is also putting up an insurmountable customs barrier. The heavy tariffs from the United States won't be paid by Lula, nor by José Batista, nor by the magnates of the Communist Party in Beijing. Who's going to bleed? Who's going to pay the bill for this 37% tariff? 0.5% built into the more than 2,000 items in our production chain. Write down this number. 2,000 tariffed items, it'll be you at the supermarket counter. It's the destruction of our competitiveness just to keep the king's friends sitting on the throne making billions in profit. And it's against this entire global structure that we fight in the information war. The system and traditional media operate in silence to hide this commercial massacre. It's only through independent intelligence networks that the truth manages to break through the blockade. The Journal National won't address this the way we do. CNN won't lay the problem bare. And that's why our work bothers so many people. I'm running for the iBest award in the political influencer category. Your vote there isn't just a click, it's the physical and overwhelming proof that our community of elite, conservative, Brazilian, hardworking analysts has a strike force that the establishment can't ignore. They try, but they won't succeed. We need to show them the size of our army. Now I'm asking for your vote. The link you need is in the description and in the first pinned comment. Go there. Secure your position in just 30 seconds and make sure we get through next Tuesday into the top 20 Nacionalista. There's a detail. We moved up from the 44th position since the nomination and today we're in first place. So we're almost there. So make sure to cast your vote every day until next Tuesday, July 28th. And to register our civic stance and prove to the algorithm the absolute weight of our mobilization, go down to the comments section right now and type the 2 code words that reveal the engineering behind this scandal. Look, it's a tactic we use here to get this video to millions of Brazilians. All Brazilians need to know about this, so type it now. Collar tariff and selective shielding. I repeat, collar fee and selective shielding. This is our indisputable verdict on the surrender of national sovereignty, and pay close attention to the final move in this political chess game. Lula was not surprised by this trade attack from the United States. He brought this attack on himself. He desperately needs these tariffs to create his dream villain. American imperialism. The tariff hike is the perfect smokescreen to inflame blind supporters and draw votes fueled by the old anti-American sentiment that still lingers in Brazil. But the ideological narrative melts away when you get to the supermarket shelf. The reality there is bare, raw, and unforgiving. In the end, the government got exactly the perfect storm it wanted. It attracted sanctions and forged its external villain. And as a planned side effect, it will make the ordinary citizen even poorer. On their knees, depending on crumbs and state subsidies to be able to pay for fuel and put food on the table. First, they operate behind the scenes, defend China and JBS, and cause the tariff hike that closes our market. Now, the same ministers are already starting to announce aid packages for the Brazilian companies that were harmed. Yeah, understand the control mechanism. The aged relic goes down into the hold, pierces the hull of our ship with his own hands, and then runs up to the deck handing out life jackets bought with our own money. Just to pose as a hero in front of a country that he himself is drowning. And in this scenario where the government sinks the ship just to appear as a hero, the lesson is brutal. Those who don't control their own narrative become hostages of the system. And in business, my friends, in business, the rule of survival is the same. Today, attention is the most valuable currency. And what hurts entrepreneurs and specialists the most is being the best at what they do and still remaining invisible, losing ground to silly dances and empty memes. And I used to think that way too. 15 years ago on radio and television, I realized that authority requires strategy. The game now is media. CMED, for example, and Havan stores, as we mentioned here, tripled their sales the moment they understood the media game. You can't outsource your identity. The owner needs to show his face. The time when you could just record with your phone without authority and expect to sell is over. The market now demands military-level professionalism, and I'm recruiting entrepreneurs and professionals who are the best at what they do but remain invisible. There's a barrier that keeps you from crossing over to this side. And what if you want to break through the bubble, be recognized, and do business, forcing the algorithm to work for you? With the machine that now generates 50 million views every month here on my channels, and all of it monetized in dollars, I created the ladder that will help you overcome the barrier of invisibility. On August 16th, mark this date, I will do this 100% in person behind closed doors. In my studio with my professional team, exclusive tactical advisory session where there are only 5 spots left, where I will guide your authority with the lethal method. Now the QR code is on the screen, secure link in the description and in the first pinned comment. But I'm hard-nosed about the numbers, my friends. There are only 5 seats. If you take the last one, the steel door closes and then you'll have to wait for another opportunity. And so you don't waste any more time looking for a good movie or a good series to watch to relax with your family, I'm recommending 2 fantastic series that even talk about the wars in the Middle East and espionage services. And yes, they do have a basis in the real world we live in. I created our channel about series and movies with daily tips on what to watch. So click the link in the description, in the pinned comment, and on the card that will appear on your screen. Support good content without woke culture, without whining, just enjoy. Now subscribe to the channel, turn on the notification bell, and leave your like on the video because it takes work to make it. Shield your mind. I'm Shimon Oliveira and I'll see you next time. See you then.